Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thanks for Sharing. I am your host, Jackie Pack, and I have with me today a guest, Erin Snow, as you can see. And she is from Seeking Integrity, located in Los Angeles, California. And I'm going to let her do her introduction instead of just reading a bio. So welcome, Erin. Thanks for being here with me. And go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and all the listeners for having me today. So I am our Vice President of Clinical Services at Seeking Integrity. So I oversee kind of the clinical programming in all of our different offerings, including our inpatient residential program. But we do treat men with compulsive sexual behavior and obviously comorbid addictions as well. And we have a lot of offerings for betrayed partners as well. And so I sort of have the role of launching new programs, overseeing current programs, and just ensuring that our flow throughout all of our programs is in integrity with who we are and how we want to help people in this world.
Okay, nice. And give me a little bit of background on Seeking. I know it's a little on the newer side, probably not that new, but it's like, yeah, okay.
So we have our founder, Dr. Rob Weiss, has been in the field for over 30 years. He's had different programs along the way. He's done other programs, lots of program creation. He's written 11, 12 books now. But this program has been around 7 years now. And it's located in Los Angeles. He wanted to create it so that it was a small program so we can have really individualized care. So it's a maximum of 8 men at a time. And yeah, it serves compulsive sexual behavior. It can be chemsex or sexualized drug use. And obviously, we're also looking at just the holistic approach of everything that's going on with this person, whether it be trauma, whether it be food addiction, whether it be gambling. So really looking at the totality of the addiction cycle for each person. And so, yeah, we've been around 7 years in Los Angeles, but definitely the history of Dr. Rob and all of his programs goes far.
Yeah, I think I've had him on my podcast maybe twice. It's been a while, but I've had him as a guest before. And then tell me a little bit about your offerings for betrayal trauma.
Yeah, so our partners are oftentimes not only traumatized, but they have nobody to go to. They don't have a community around them yet because they feel like this is so stigmatized and shameful, and they don't know who they can trust to talk about these things with. So we wanted to make everything as accessible as possible. So we have 16 free groups per week on our platform. At least half of those are for betrayed partners. And so it's a community of women who are all experiencing betrayal trauma that can come together to get support, to have community, to actually find a place to talk about this openly and honestly. We also have work groups. So those are 6 to 12 weeks, and those are low cost. They're like $395, but there's Betrayed Partners Part 1 and Part 2. That's run by Angela Spearman, who's amazing. It has a work group. It has the same group of women throughout the entire time. And they really do build strong connections in there and have a path for like regulating and stabilizing in the crisis, but also a path forward.
Okay.
We also have another work group that focuses strictly on boundaries. That's Debbie McRae, and really amazing how to develop internal and external boundaries through this process that feels like a whirlwind, like a tornado has taken over your whole life. And then we also have a retreat that we offer 4 times a year. It's been in Arizona, it's been in Texas, it's been in Kentucky, it's been around. So the next one is in May, and that's in Kentucky, and that's 4 days, and it's really experiential. It really focuses on the women coming in. They look like they've been through hell. And the whole experience is about, we don't even talk about the addicts that much. I mean, it is about reclaiming your own empowerment and recognizing you're not alone. You have sisters all around you that are going to hold you up and support you. And so that's a really incredible experience as well. So lots of offerings kind of on both sides.
Yeah, I love that.
Important about Seeking Integrity is not everyone can afford residential treatment, and not even everyone can afford, like a licensed CSAT either. So try to give as much as we can away for free, all the way to free, low cost, and then obviously the residential and retreats, which are, more of a monetary.
Yeah, I know when Dr. Weiss started Seeking Integrity, one of his goals, because he's worked at a lot of residential programs, some of the premier programs out there, And I know it was one of those like, how can we also offer really quality services that allow people with financial restraints or whatever's going on to also access the quality treatment that is necessary. So
Yeah.
I admired that about him when he started that, because residential can be very pricey and it's usually out of pocket. And so that can be a difficult thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's important too. He really wanted the partner to have support
Mhm.
while the addict was in treatment,
Yeah.
you know. And so we have a partner specialist that is only dedicated to working with the partner during the
Mm.
process of treatment. So, and obviously they have couple sessions and they are included in the aftercare planning process and all that, but it's really this person is there to, and her name's Tamara. She's amazing with partners, but her job is just to love on the partner, to connect them to
Mhm.
resources, to help them reorient themselves to their own healing journey, because the brain has a funny way. And I'm a betrayed partner, and I actually experienced betrayal trauma while in this role.
Interesting.
And I remembered that first night finding this out. It felt like the rug was like pulled out from under me. And I literally felt like the room was spinning, and how the brain naturally goes to this place of, I need more information. And we call those safety seeking behaviors. But
Right.
even everything I know in this role, it took me the entire night to peel my brain off of all of the images it was creating and the trauma spin that I felt like I was in, to regulate myself again and to
Mhm.
say, okay, I have to get safe. And so I have so much empathy for partners, because oftentimes when they're coming in, even whether that's to one of our groups or being supported through residential, they're over here like, I can't stop trying to micromanage their recovery. I can't stop going through the phone records and the
Mm.
emails and the tracking their location. And I can't stop doing that. But what happens is they spend all their time doing that
Mhm.
and they stay dysregulated and they're not able to focus on their own healing. And I recognize that that's the brain's natural propensity in trauma, is to say, well, if I know more, then I'll know I'm safe. So I
Mhm.
think for us, it was a big deal to support them in a way that's like, we can help you to feel safe. Okay. And stabilize in this moment and regulate in this moment so that you can actually make choices in this relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love that offering. Is that because I know are your work groups for partners also? I think your residential for men is like a 14, 21, and 28. Is that it? Day
Correct.
programs? And is that
Yeah.
similar for partners
No.
for the work
So the
groups?
work group is more like a workshop, right? We've
Okay.
talked
Okay.
about, and trust me, it's on the docket,
Mm.
creating a residential for betrayal trauma. We're not there yet, but probably looking more towards 2026. So aside from the retreat that's 4 days, we would love to have a program where they can come and do 14, 21, or 28 days to actually, really process what is going on in their body and in their experience and have clear choices and boundaries moving forward. But the work group it's once a week. So it's a group and it has curriculum. It has actual stages through the process. There's two parts to this. So it's 6 weeks, part one, 6 weeks, part two. But it is
Okay.
with the same women, the same facilitator, the same material. But that is once a week group.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So that's an overview introduction to the programs and resources available at Seeking Integrity. But let's get into talking about, before I hit record, we were talking about some of the things that you guys see with the men, the addicts who are coming to you for help. Why don't you get into some of that, the unique things that happen with the clients you're treating?
Yeah. So I was telling you, Jackie, that I ran inpatient residential substance use and mental health programs before I got into the sex addiction world. And so when I started working and learning and growing in this space, I thought it was so bizarre to me that there were some trends that just kept popping up over and over and over again. And I now see in hindsight, okay, this makes a lot of sense. But one of those is, I would say, the vast majority. So I don't know, if I threw a number out, it'd be like 80% of our inpatient residential clients identify enmeshment with a mother.
Mhm.
And they don't always know that that's what it is. But
Right.
I've learned over time, they start to talk about dad. They'll say, oh, he was absent, or he was abusive, or he was critical, or he was really passive and not around. And I'm always go to, well, tell me about mom, and now
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to learn men learn intimacy from their mothers, and they learn their self-worth and their self-esteem and their purpose in this world from their fathers. And so it made sense to me that we have two trends. One is enmeshment with a mother is very common in this particular addiction. The second is performance-based validation, that my validation comes from what I do in this world, the money that I make, the moves that I make, what I have materially, that's who I am. And underneath that, I actually don't have a clue who I am. And I don't know how to, I don't know how to, I don't know how to just be in my own skin and know that I
Mm-hmm.
have value. So those two
Yeah.
things put together seem to be a really common trend throughout our clients coming to treatment.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, I mean, I shared with you too. We see a lot of that as well. Just that lack of having a sense of self at a core level beyond performance or
Mhm.
achievement or success or attainment. That usually seems to be absent, missing, not developed in the first place. And so that's something we have to get. We have to get somewhat of a functional self in place in order to then get some traction to, especially if we're looking for not just a band-aid fix or just getting them into sobriety, but really doing the work of recovery that's going to
Mhm.
move them into long-term recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah, because what we uncover under what we may see as this highly successful person by the world standards, they're very intellectual, they're very detail and task oriented, but they have no idea what is going on in their body and no idea what's going on in their emotional body. So
Yeah.
even asking them, what do you need right now? They look at you like, I have no idea. I don't know. And I think part of that is in the enmeshment piece of this is that as little boys, their needs were not prioritized. It was, I can't have needs. My purpose is to make sure mom's okay, to make sure
Mm-hmm.
mom's happy. If I have a need, she takes it personally. If I have a need, she will make it twisted about how, oh, you're telling me that I haven't been there for you, or ungrateful. So they just learned my job is to make sure that the family system is okay. And their
Mm-hmm.
needs were really kind of thrown out early on.
Mm-hmm.
And they did learn they got love for achievement, love for being good, for getting good grades, for being the star athlete, for, that's what they learned. So they really cut off this part of their authentic self early on for the sake of holding on to being attached to
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. And as grown men, they have these little boys sitting inside of them that don't have a clue how to get their needs met. And they go off into this other dark compartment to get their needs met where no one else in their real life exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to, like, I've talked about this on my podcast before. I've talked about mesh family systems, but let's just, for an overview, if this is an episode people are listening, or this is the first time they've heard that concept of meshed, and especially like enmeshment with mom, let's go over that. How do you introduce that to them?
Yeah, this is a challenging one to introduce to the client because they have this soul contract with mom, whether mom's alive or not. That was my job is to make sure that mom is okay and mom is happy. So they almost were, it's like an unconscious promise not ever to come up against them, not to have boundaries with them, not to that they're fragile. So don't upset mom, keep mom happy. And so even as adult men, even for men whose mothers have passed away, this is a
Mm-hmm.
really sensitive topic for them. They don't see it right away and they definitely don't want to talk about it. And so enmeshment, just in terms of a mother, what we look for is basically where the child was made to be a covert like spouse, that
Mm-hmm.
the parental coalition was not intact, was not there. So those parents were not supporting one another. Mom looked for comfort and to have her needs met by a child or children. And so it's a lack of boundaries. It's a lack of, it stunts emotional development. It is a kind of I use the child for comfort, for passing the time, for emotional, like I can tell you everything. So oftentimes that lack of boundaries is like they shared everything about the marriage and how it wasn't going well. They put their emotional needs on the child versus the way that it should be, where the parent is there to support the emotional needs of the kid. It is almost like a form of like covert incest in some ways, where it looks a lot like they're just a pseudo partner to their
Mm-hmm.
mom. And so that could be meddling and controlling. It could be jealousy over them when they're starting to individuate and even maybe start being interested in a romantic partner. That oftentimes that mom is not so happy about that or very critical of that partner. So it plays out in a number of different ways. But yeah, clients in treatment have a hard time. So we're very sensitive when we're introducing this. They may read Silently Seduced by Dr. Ken Adams. They may just begin to kind of will drop little crumbs in there about really looking at, it's not about blaming a parent, that it's just about recognizing the needs that weren't met by the little boy that's still very much sitting
Mm-hmm.
inside of your seat right now.
Right.
And they tend to be, once they have a connection to their inner child and they have a connection to some compassion for them, they're able to kind of see, he cried alone in his room. He didn't have anyone to go to and talk to.
Mm-hmm.
He would go find mom and be like, Mom, I'm going to do some chores for you so that, it brightens your day. Or remember sitting on the couch while she drinks a glass of wine, talking about all the things her dad did that day, remembering that they wanted to play outside, but they couldn't because mom wasn't feeling really good that day. And so they needed to
Mm-hmm.
stay back and support. So all of those things, they start to kind of, oh my goodness, they start to see
Mm-hmm.
it. But it is rough to introduce.
Right. Well, and often clients can mistake an enmeshed relationship for closeness,
Absolutely.
and they might get a sense of the performance, but also power in being able to do that for mom,
Hmm.
to be able to make her feel better or to, listen to her and be a support person for mom. She is giving them some power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that comes with a lot of like kind of the golden child. So it's also a lot of love bomb. You're everything to me. You matter so much to me. So there is this inherent sense of worth filling that.
Mhm.
But what they don't necessarily see until later is that once they become adults, the things that they could not express in childhood, which is like, I really do want to go outside and play, or I wish an adult could take care of you, or I feel suffocated by the pressure,
Mhm.
they transfer that exact experience into their romantic relationships. So they
Yeah.
couldn't verbalize it as a child, but here they are as adults. Guess what they're feeling in their romantic partnerships? They're feeling suffocated. They feel
Mhm.
trapped. They feel like they can't verbalize their needs or they don't have needs at all. So it creates, and it could be avoidance, right? When we look at attachment, like that could be a lot of avoidant males are born out of enmeshed
Mhm.
relationships.
Yeah.
But so it is important for us, I think, to show them kind of where this started and recognize how this has been transferred into their ability to have intimacy as adults. Because
Mhm.
once they see that, it's almost like they transposed a mask of their mother onto their partner. And those
And do
feelings are
you
now
find some of the resentment towards mom or that mom would have created or is at the core of actually gets transferred to the partner? Like I
100%.
know I've worked with men before who will say, we're headed out on our honeymoon, we're sitting on the plane, and like something just shifted.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
it was just like, I can't get close to this person.
Hmm. Yes. It is this. So whether you're avoidantly attached, anxiously attached, whatever it is, that first stage of love is fairly easy. They
Mhm.
both parties rush in and they want
Yeah,
hot connection now, right? What happens is when commitment,
right.
expectation, and responsibility is placed on the relationship, the avoidant or the one who has experienced enmeshment is like all of a sudden, like now I'm trapped at home. Their
Mhm.
whole insides literally shift where
Yeah,
this person's my mom. She's placed expectations on me, responsibility, commitments, and I don't want that. I don't want
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
Whether
a lot
they
of
agreed to it or not, that's the feeling they get all of a sudden when they recognize that I'm in this committed relationship. It comes with all of the things that maybe they weren't fully aware of, but that happened with mom.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This is largely subconscious to these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once you draw it out, they're like, oh my God, that's been every relationship I've ever been in. And how do they handle it? They just get their needs met outside of the marriage,
Right.
right? But they don't know how to say, you know what, I feel a little bit smothered. And I wonder if, or when I have really like close moments of intimacy, I get this kind of hangover and I need some space just to feel like I'm holding on to myself. Like they can't
Mm-hmm.
do that. They haven't learned how
Right.
to do that. They don't even know that
Right.
it's happening. It's like this. And so what they do is like, well, this is my reality. I don't like the way I feel in it. So I'm just going to go over here and watch porn and masturbate, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, you know, that new limerence feeling of love when I start texting with somebody brings that feeling back up
Mm-hmm.
that I'm alive, I'm okay, I'm not drowning, I'm not trapped,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. And so until we really address the core issue and how it works and it's working itself out in the relationship, they struggle in
Yeah.
intimate partnership.
And you were saying for a lot of these clients, they've been able to, if they had co-occurring addictions, they've been able to have some success in sobriety and some recovery in those areas, but
Sure.
not here.
Yeah. So the ones where they struggled with drugs and alcohol early on, or even, they were able to, we get a lot of clients that come in and they're like, I'm 20 years sober from drugs and
Mm-hmm.
alcohol, but this beast, I cannot get a hold of it unless it's sexualized drug use where the two things are paired. And you'll look at their addiction cycle and it's like they literally are fused, that
Mm-hmm.
one does not really exist without the other. They struggle with getting sober from drugs and alcohol because it's paired with this thing.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and they're kind of baffled by that. And I think the truth under the surface is all addiction has roots in trauma, no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about that.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. And negative core beliefs and all of the things that come with addiction. But this particular addiction, it infuses, it's this intimacy disorder that underlies it, that infuses your ability to connect with everybody, not
Mm-hmm.
just intimate partnerships, but also it's like I can have a lot of acquaintances, I can have a lot of
Right.
business relationships, but I don't know how to be authentic because I don't even know what my authentic self is. I don't know who it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Right.
So
Well,
they
and that's
struggle with
where
this.
sometimes I'll hear from their partners, there's just a depth missing. And when you can talk to them about that, that extends to friendships, it extends to, like you were saying, business
Mhm.
relationships. All of them can only go to a certain point when there's not that knowing of self on board,
Yeah.
because that's where that connection happens. That's where it feels safe to be known and seen, and the person knows who they are and that they
Yeah.
have those needs and wants.
Yep. And they just live in the world in a bunch of masks. They figured out
Mm-hmm.
what works for people to like me, for people to
Right.
connect with me. Okay. It's money and it's success. Maybe it's my humor that
Mm-hmm.
I'm the gatherer. I bring everybody together and we have a really great time. Maybe it's my ability to solve a problem, right? That I can jump in and
Mm-hmm.
rescue everybody. That's what gets me love. But they don't actually know underneath that, they're deeply ashamed of the parts of themselves that they hide from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And they repress and push down and push to the side. And they end up living like this double life. It's my external world, and then it's the world that nobody knows and nobody talks about. And
Yeah.
until the two things are integrated, it is a deeply lonely existence.
Well, and often there is that belief that if people really did know those parts that I keep hidden, they wouldn't accept me,
Yeah.
which fosters that continual living at the surface, having the masks, playing the
Mhm.
roles. I mean, I'm thinking of a client that I've worked with who would say, I'm the guy that everybody likes, but nobody knows. And I would often have to remind him, including
Mhm.
you, you don't know yourself either, which is why nobody
Yes,
else can know you.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that this addiction in particular is so stigmatized that
Mm-hmm.
like I can say, hey, I'm in recovery from drugs and alcohol. And people are like, good for you, like badge of
Mm-hmm.
honor, good for you. You say you're a sex addict, and people are like, hide your wife and kids.
Right, right.
Still not, even though it's an epidemic in our society across the board, they don't have those more public spaces. So when they say if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me, they're right in a lot of
Right.
circles. That
Hmm.
if you really knew what I watched in pornography, you really knew what I'm doing behind closed doors, you would reject me. And in some cases that's true. So it's so important in recovery to be connected with other men and
Hmm.
other people that are going through your same, so that they can look at you and say, I get it. I
Yeah.
don't judge you. I've been there too. I
Hmm.
understand. It destigmatizes some of that shame that comes with, like, I'm some kind of pariah of society, that I'll never be, I'm so bad that no one could ever know me.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, without that functional self, I find sometimes they don't know. They feel bad about how bad they have been, but there's also this like that they don't know what their boundaries are. They don't know what their limits are. So it's like I could be even worse than I'm aware of, which again is going to keep them in shame at the core and hiding externally.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, like, we have to explore with them how far they could go, and actually accepting that part of ourselves versus shaming it and cutting it off. It's like we talk a lot about befriending the shadow that showed up for me. Most of them, it was pre-adolescence or early adolescence, like early exposure to something developmentally inappropriate on a sexual level. You showed up for me in a time where I didn't know what else to do. You were a coping strategy for me. And yes, as I've grown older, it's caused problems. But we always say, like, thank it for being there the way that it
Yeah,
was, and dismissing it when you have something else to move toward.
right. And often it's the one place that mom didn't know, or it's the one thing they had for themselves that was in some way meeting a want and a need that they fully were not understanding the complexity of the whole dynamic.
Absolutely. It was like, this I have control over. This brings me relief. This brings me a sense of connection to myself. This brings me a
Hmm.
sense of pleasure. There's dopamine there. So I don't feel as sad. I don't feel as alone. And yeah, they started to use this as a coping mechanism that carried on throughout life. I mean, the
Hmm.
vast majority of our clients have had some type of exposure, or at least the behavior with chronic masturbation early on.
Right,
From the You were like, this is relief, and no one
right.
knows, and I feel
Hmm.
better, and I don't feel so alone, and
Yeah,
I have control in this compartment, that I get to call the shots here.
yeah. And it's one thing they can do for themselves, usually in secrecy, but it's one thing that they can start to do for themselves in meeting their own need or their own something, right? Whether that's actually a need or not, it's meeting something for them as a
Mhm.
separate person from mom or the other people that they've enmeshed with because that's the model that was set up for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, now you're an adult.
Hmm.
How do we teach you ways to have like that have the same effect, which is, I'm meeting a need for myself.
Hmm.
I feel relief. I feel connection. That all of these things can be met in a way that's integrated with the man you want to be. The self that you're, I always tell them, it's like a little sprout growing out of like new soil. And I'm like, that's your new little self growing, your authentic, functional self.
Hmm. Yeah.
I say you got to protect it with everything you have, because it is fragile. It's brand new, and you're learning. It's almost like
Hmm.
emotional kindergarten in treatment.
Yeah.
Recognition, awareness of, and then actually moving that to sharing it with somebody else, receiving love or receiving, support. It's complicated
Hmm.
for,
Yeah.
and then I've never done this.
Yeah. Which I also will tell clients because sometimes that can be overwhelming for them to think like, okay, I don't have a self. How do you get that? Right. I will always tell them, no, it's in there. It's
Mhm.
already in there. It might be underdeveloped. It might, it might not be something that's strong and really functional at this time, but it's already there. It's in you, and you just have to start connecting to that. The other thing I get sometimes is they often are afraid, like, but what if it's as bad as I think I am? That core
Mhm.
self, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's okay. We're not understanding core self. It's not like it couldn't be. And it will also feel very comfortable because it's you.
Mhm.
It's who you are. Like sometimes I'm just like, you're gonna have to trust me on this initially, but people recognize that core self when they encounter it, like themselves. They
Yes.
recognize it because it is them.
And that's why I think for me, the entry point sometimes is connecting with the child, the last place they had
Hmm.
a self. And
Yeah.
sometimes it was pre-verbal, right? It
Yeah.
was pre-language, it was but finding that little person that wanted to come into the world and be authentic, that wanted
Hmm.
to explore and play and do all the things, and had big dreams and had little best friends, and that might be the last authentic version that they
Hmm.
remember. And so I always say, I do a lot of somatic work and visualization, but like picking that little boy up. Like we have teddy bears all over the office because I actually will have them carry one around with them
Mm.
all day long. And if that's the last place you remember having a self, then let's start there,
Hmm.
right? And then it also delineates that I have this child may have needs, and he's allowed to have needs because he's a kid, right? I decided a
Hmm.
long time ago, I'm an adult. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. But that I can honor that he has needs. And as an adult, I can meet some of those needs. I can say, you are
Right.
loved just like you are. It isn't your fault. Or hey, you're really angry right now. I can hold you in this. Begins to like start this little column of core acceptance, core compassion for self, and a little bit of that authentic awareness that I am in there. I am in
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
Just lost my way
Yeah.
because I dealt a deck of cards that didn't create a warm environment to continue that way.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
breath work too, we do breath work journeys in
Mm.
treatment. For some of them, when they can't get it on the intellectual level and even on the emotional level, when they're doing breath work, it seems to be that first time they do it, it's like the first time they say, I felt that feeling wash over me, that I am loved, that I am okay, that I am whole. And it was once you feel it, it's like a knowing that no one can take away from you.
Right.
That's a powerful shift,
Yeah.
having that experience, because sometimes it's met with such critical mind and such, really staunch built defenses.
Mm.
But breath work removes the ego. It's like it's not there anymore. And so they kind of they feel it
Yeah.
against the best efforts to shut it down.
Yeah. Breath work literally takes them into their body, and they've got to get out of their heads.
Yeah,
They've got to be in the body and be focused on what is happening there in order to know if they're breathing deep, if they're doing all of those things. So there are things there for them to focus on, just not the typical things that they typically are focused on.
totally. Yeah. So it's a wild journey to watch. I think the first thing is
Hmm.
like bringing the behavior that's controlling and ruling their life like into concrete structure, behavior into structure, and then bringing that into relationship and
Hmm.
accountability. And they're in this group of men and watching them for the first time be really truly seen by someone else
Hmm.
and loved for just who they are, and then beginning to practice those beginning intimacy skills that we want them to take home with them, using that in the group. So
Yeah.
I don't like something you did. Oh my God, I have to say it. I have to share if
Hmm.
I'm resentful. I have to share that if I'm struggling to trust you. I have to ask you for a hug when I need one. I have like all of those things that we want them to be able to do. They're starting to do that in this group of men for the
Hmm.
first time ever. And it's really precious to watch. Some of them for the first time saying, I've never really had a friend until this moment.
Hmm.
And seeing that bond form. And for many of them, they stay in touch for years
Yeah.
after.
Yeah. Yeah.
It-
We find that as well in the groups that we run, and we have various levels, but really underneath whatever the group is, whether it's our foundations group or the mid-level group, the goal there is always connection, that authentic connection where needs start to come out, and they're learning that attachment language, which I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
I will talk to them about that attachment language. It's not that complicated. And sometimes I find when they're feeling connected, when they're feeling seen, or they were able to express, like, I don't know if I can trust you because of this. And the other person accepts that and they have a conversation in the group, the attachment language just shows up.
It does. It's intuitive. Yeah. when you're connected to your body, when you're connected to being actually fully present in the moment and you feel connection to someone else, it does show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're right. It's creating those experiences where they are plugged in that way, because then it's a feeling and it's a knowing, and it's not just us passing education on to them, which goes right up
Right.
here. And both
Right.
things are important. You have to do both, but it's beautiful in those moments. Like you said, it's intuitive when you're actually fully in your body and you're able to attach to those emotions and you see someone else reflecting that back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. And
It
of
is.
course, that's where recovery flows from.
Yes. Yep. And I remember my early days of recovery. I mean, the group floated me because I remember, I had to basically cut off the entire life I had before. So all the friends and the family and where I lived and everything to start this new life. And that group became the new chosen family. And we shared the same language and we could talk about these things. And we knew what it felt like to be scared to relapse. And we knew what it felt like to have shame and carry that with us, wreckage of our past and making amends. And so it was like building a new family. And that's my same hope for them, is that in building this recovery family, that they start to be able to translate those skills to their families of origin, to their partnerships at home, to their children.
Yeah.
It's hugely important.
Right. Yeah.
Much harder, but hugely important.
It is. Right. And I think, again, just going back to that mother enmeshment, so much of mothering is about attuning to that child and learning their language. I mean, when they are preverbal, they have a language, and it's not one that mothers have spoken for, decades, but
Yep.
they start to intuit what the needs are,
Yes.
and they respond appropriately. That's what healthy mothering looks like. That's what attachment and attunement is really about, in addition to not just meeting the needs of like food,
Right.
but it's those emotional needs of kind of gazing at the child, or just, like that feeling of like, I mean, I don't know if you have kids. I had kids, they're all in there, they're all adults now. But there were so many times I was reflecting the other day of like, sometimes, my husband would come and say, okay, the baby's asleep, let's put the baby down. And I'm like, I don't want to.
When you're
I don't,
nap
I'm not
trapped.
done. Yeah. Yeah. Or you're just like, no, I'm not finished.
But the biology in motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
and I have three little boys, and
Okay.
if that is intact, and I think of moms that are severely traumatized or don't
Mm-hmm.
have those skills, of course they don't know how to pass it on.
Right.
With me, I remember, yeah, holding your new baby, and what kind of cry means they have gas versus they are
Mm-hmm.
hungry. When they start making tiny little coo sounds, that you're reflecting those back to them. And there
Mm-hmm.
is that innateness to, I didn't necessarily learn that anywhere, but it's how I learned to respond to my baby. I think, yeah, the mothers that aren't able to pass that on, that so much happens in those first 3 years of life.
Mm-hmm.
Before you even have language, they
Yeah.
recognize, cry, no one's coming for me.
Right.
When I'm scared, no one comforts me.
Um, Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, or that when mom picks me up, it doesn't feel good. Mhm. Or
Not
mom
the
is stressed
soothing.
and all of a sudden the crying baby is like, wow, that feels worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if this like dysregulation is passed down in families sometimes before they even had a chance. That's why a lot of our guys sitting in the chairs, and I say, you were always going to be here. You
Mm-hmm.
did not,
Yeah.
some of the childhoods, they did not have a chance. No
Right.
way.
Yeah. And I
Some of
think I've been in the field working in addiction. I started off in substance addiction and then just kind of evolved over. I think I've been in the field over 30 years. And so
amazing.
seeing kind of the evolution of just how in that 30 years the field has evolved and our understanding has shifted and changed in good ways, I think. But understanding, we used to talk a lot when I was new in the field about like, is it nature versus nurture? And is it biological? Is it genetic? And I was surprised at how many clients preferred genetic. Like, this
Mhm.
is genetic. And I'm like, well, why would you want that? Because then you're screwed. Like, what can we do if it's genetic? I mean, I get that nobody is at fault or there's nobody to blame, but this is just your life then, and we can't do, like, why are you here in my office if it's just genetics? Because like I'm not a geneticist. And understanding, I think I listened to a podcast, this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where somebody was just saying the answer to that question, nature versus nurture, is that we have natures that need a lot of nurturing. And I think when we look at that, what you just said, that dysregulation is passed down. Yeah, that's where addiction is
Yes.
formed, right? And that's what we're passing down is dysregulation, and then the need to escape, numb, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, it can look genetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It look
Yeah.
genetic. Hey, and when you look at the medical model, and definitely there's like some research for genetics, but
Right.
how can you delineate that because I had an alcoholic parent who caused chaos in our household, who, I was the lost child over here, and that I too became an alcoholic, not simply because I'm genetically connected to this person, because I lived in an environment where I felt that chaos was love. I felt that I saw that self-soothing came through a bottle. I was alone. I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I only learned to numb them. That of course. Yeah. I mean, the links now, I mean, all research points to childhood trauma is like the root of
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
evil, because I mean, even the ACEs study was kind of the first one in the 90s to break onto the scene. And it was so unbelievably conclusive that not only does childhood trauma impact, obviously, suicide rates and addiction, but every major health epidemic out there, from lung
Right.
cancer to, I mean, it's so
To breast cancer,
everything.
to like so many, right? And what's fascinating is the authors of the ACE study said like our published results were not welcome.
No, they
Like
were not.
they did not want
No,
what we had found.
no, no. And also, a lot of people said, oh, well, that's just a bunch of, middle class white people. And it was like, or saying, oh, that was just a bunch of minorities that you were looking at. And it was
Yeah.
like, actually, these were college students. Okay. 17,000 college students who their experience of childhood trauma absolutely led them to negative health outcomes across the board. And so
Yeah.
it was totally, but it was a groundbreaking study that the rest of the bodies did not want. And look
Right.
how long it's taken, even in addiction treatment. It took the opiate epidemic, I think, really, for people to start saying something is very wrong here. Obviously, we have big pharma, but it was people are not staying sober.
Right.
They're the washing machine cycle of going through treatment and not getting sober. The success rate was so low. It was when they really started to say, okay, clearly trauma is a part of this. And if that's not a treatment model, success dramatically goes down.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful now that it's pretty mainstream understanding that you need to do that level of work, even if it's not in the first 30 days. I mean, I would argue that you got to meet them where they are, whatever that looks like.
Right.
But doing that work is critical to getting traction, as you said, in recovery. If I don't believe I'm worthy of a good life, if I don't believe that anyone will love me or trust, or I can trust anyone in this world, those are some gnarly core beliefs to try to build, a healthy life and recovery on.
And then it just would make sense that addiction's going to be part of that.
100%. And it confirms,
like, wouldn't it be?
And I escape from my negative core belief, all in this cycle of, I'm a piece of shit. And it also, it also relieves me from feeling like that's who I am, and so I'm so grateful with clinicians like you that really do get it, and listening to your podcast, you really get it. And the work that you're doing really gets it. And you're putting that information out to the general public about ways to move forward through this, that you're not, I always say, you're not bad people. You're broken. You can put your core, and I see it, is so good. There is such a good core in there, and it's been covered up in layers and layers of things, and you don't even see that it's in there anymore. But I
Mm-hmm.
want to dig it out, and I want to grow it. And these
Right.
people in this room, these brothers are going to help you to see it, reflect it, and
Mm-hmm.
grow it.
Yeah. And then the client just instinctually starts to move towards it. Like I find that, and they start to question things that like I couldn't get them to start like I knew that this belief was not healthy or that they needed to question the story they were given, and all of a sudden they start to do it. They start to question and say, I don't think that's accurate. And I'm
Absolutely.
just like, oh my gosh, finally.
Can't, we can't go turn that light bulb on for
Yeah.
them. It's
Right.
so much more powerful when they arrive there on their own, and we're just kind of guiding the horse to water,
Right.
and we're
Yes.
hoping that they're going to get there. And when they have those moments, it's like the biggest heart explosion, because we've seen it from the beginning. And if we
Mm-hmm.
could just write it all on paper and be like, here's the problem and here's how you fix it, then therapy
Mm-hmm.
would be easy and through 2 sessions. It's
Yeah.
about peeling those layers back and having them arrive there.
Right. And letting that work happen at a pace that they can sustain.
Tolerate too.
Um, yeah. Yeah. I know this came up last week in the men's group that I co-facilitate, and it comes up from time to time where they're like, they'll say to one of their group members, don't you wish Jackie would just tell you who you are and what to do and how to get there? And I'll let the conversation go on for a little bit. And then I'm like, look, I've been telling you it'd be helpful for you to get a journal for 3 years. And you just got one and you love it. So me telling you what to do, that's not really what you want. And I cannot tell you who you are, because then that's who Jackie thinks you are, but that's not who you know you are. You have to find that. I can't know that for you. I can tell you it's good. I can tell you it will feel very comfortable and
Mhm.
you will be at peace. I can tell you those things, but I can't tell you who you are at the core. You have to discover that. And I can help show you and guide you to that, as well as the other men in this group. But that's your work. That's exciting work.
It is. And it doesn't end either. And this whole life, I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
still uncovering layers of myself, and
Mm-hmm.
it is, you become, I'm not so avoidant to even the hard lessons because I know I have myself. I'm going to
Yeah.
be okay. Life is cyclical, it's peaks and valleys. I know that another valley will come, another challenge will come. None of us are, you know, free from suffering in this life. Like
Mm-hmm.
you experience pain from time to time. But when that core, that functional core is intact, you know that you're going to weather it, but you're not going to crumble to pieces, even if you lose an attachment, even if you know how to sit with it. And that's where that peace is. It is comfortable and it is peace because home is inside of me.
Yeah.
It's not connected to everything externally about whether it's opinions or pressures or the job or the relationship. Those things can all be painful and wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I know that home, the stability, the anchor lives right here inside of me.
Yeah.
And that's what gives them for the first time, like, I'm not going to die.
Right.
Like survival isn't being attached or not being attached or having the job or not having the
Mm-hmm.
job. That's the feeling of home is inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's beautiful work. It's beautiful to see on an inpatient basis, obviously, because you get to see the morning, noon, and night, like in every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yeah.
But seeing them wake up, I always say you never know you're sleeping until you wake up.
Right.
And
Right.
up is like, I am loved.
Yeah. And they never knew that the way they were going through life asleep could look so different.
Totally. Yeah. And it's a powerful journey. It's a difficult. A lot of our clients come in, like
Mm-hmm.
mass denial, lots of narcissistic traits, lots of, you know, and seeing the transformation once those pieces fall off,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not afraid of them. You can
Right.
be a jerk today. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going anywhere, but I am going to
Mm-hmm.
reflect back to you that I think, here's what's stirring under the surface and why you're putting this defense up and pushing people away.
Right. Yeah.
His work is complicated and it's
It is so
this.
complicated, and it is also amazing, and it's also beautiful. I tell people, because I know therapists who don't do this kind of work, and they're like, I don't know how you do it. And I'm like, I never am bored.
No.
Like, that's for sure. I'm never bored. I
Mhm.
mean, the field is evolving, but also to be able to work with clients at this depth, it's just, I mean, it is rewarding as a clinician when you see them start to connect with that authentic self. And then start to grow that and expand that to their relationships, to their family systems. It's challenging and it's complex.
But we're never bored. That's the
No,
truth.
we are never bored.
And I think as therapists, we have to find the thing that we each can do. That I think for me, it was two things. I thought, because I was a teacher previously, that I would want to work with kids. But what I
Mm,
recognized in working with children is that I could not leave it at work. I could not walk home.
yeah,
And I thought about them all night long. I wanted to rescue every single one of them. And most of them did not have agency in their life to actually change
yeah,
their life, support. So, some people would be like, I could never, ever, ever work with sex addicts. Like I couldn't do that. And I'm like, well, then that's a good indicator that it's not for you. But for
yeah,
me, we can sit in that position of non-judgment, recognize that we came from the behavior is terrible. Certainly, absolutely. It's hurt people. It's not okay. And that there's a human under there. And I can do this work. I can jump into it with them and I can close myself back up and I can be with my family.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
it's figuring out where each therapist really lights up and it's clear you up in this realm.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I jokingly will say, because addiction was not on my radar when I graduated into this field.
Yeah.
I was just like, what would I do with addiction? I don't even think I know addicts. And working in the field, I started to be like, wait a minute, is my dad an addict? Which sounds so naive.
No,
But I was
doesn't.
like, I think my dad has many addictions. And I felt like, because the first job offer I actually got out of grad school was working in substance addiction. And I
Wow.
was like, yeah, no. And I lied and I told them that I was going out of town and that I would get back to them in 2 weeks. And I hustled for 2 weeks to find any other job,
Anything.
anything else. And I knew that their insurance started on day one. And I had been through college and then grad school. And I was like, this is what I told myself, like, I just want to go to the dentist. So I will take this job. I will take their insurance and then I'll keep looking for a job and I'm out of here. 30 something years later, I'm still working in addiction and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. But I feel like my call to work in this field kind of had to chase me down, grab me by the collar and pull me into it. And then I was like, oh, this actually connects some pieces to my personal puzzle that I didn't have.
That's so amazing. I mean, same for me. And you say, "Oh, maybe that's naive, but like the truth is, the things closest to us are the most blurry because it's
Yes.
always just been our
Yeah.
existence. I
Yes.
remember I discovered I was an addict in
Mm.
grad school. I was like the one class we had on addiction. Okay. I remember
Yeah.
one, and it was like a winter session. So it was like 4 weeks or something. I remember being like, this sounds like me. And I had like a breakdown being like, I can't be a therapist and have issues. So I think the process too was in school was uncovering all the layers of
Yeah.
ourselves. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
know yourself, you'll end up treating yourself in the chair over there. If
Mm-hmm.
you have to have some level of awareness. So for you saying, oh my God, I realized my dad, that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me. I think we all started to look at each other in grad school and be like, things are not as we once thought.
Right. Right. I'm here to help other people because I kind of have it together. I mean, I don't know that I thought that at the time, but
I
that's,
did. You
yeah.
did. You did.
Yeah.
So
So,
it's a wild and same. I was like,
mm-hmm.
I had this preconceived idea of what addiction treatment was. I didn't want to be around those people. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
be, and same thing. I fell into it sideways, ended up getting sober myself and then never left. But I will
Mm-hmm.
say I thought having ran, these treatment centers that I wouldn't be surprised by sex addiction. I was like, it's got to be same roots and same. That is not true. I am surprised because
Yeah.
the vastness of the arousal template is pretty wild. And so
Yes. Yeah.
this day, I'm like, wow, that's a new one for me. Never knew about that fetish or
Uh-huh.
that. It is definitely a different world and keeps me on my toes for sure.
Yeah.
Sexuality is just, yeah, the vastness of the ways in which we developed an arousal template and
Hmm.
all the many things that can be on it.
Yeah.
Subconscious is just a roller coaster of fun. So yeah,
And
not
maybe you've heard Dr. Card say this before too. I've heard him say it multiple times where he'll talk about spirituality and sexuality. And I think it kind of encapsulates what we have been talking about in terms of sex addiction and the complexity at the core and the wounds at the core. But he talks about, and he'll say, spirituality is what gives life meaning. Sexuality is the most meaningful parts of the self.
yes,
And that is not how our society approaches sexuality
all
at all. And, but I think when clients get to that core self, of course they understand that sexuality is the most meaningful expression of themselves.
totally. And how can you do that in a way that honors yourself, that doesn't come with loads of shame, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't like integrating that part is a huge piece that I find spirituality almost in sync. Those two things
Yes.
come
Yeah.
together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
No, our
true.
society is like, don't talk about it, don't communicate about it.
Mm-hmm.
Billions and billions of dollars are going on all over here. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but here's who, so there is no real means for healthy expression. It's like some deviant side gig, or it's like vanilla right in front of my face. That's the part I'm
Mm-hmm.
allowed. But there is no, expression of sexuality is vast and beautiful and
Right.
creative and interesting and ways of expressing parts of ourselves we could never express in our day-to-day life.
Right.
That it can be
Or
a really
even verbally, like we couldn't
yes,
express that with words or
absolutely. Yeah. I love this work because I do kind of feel like we're on the front lines of a big epidemic of bringing sexuality and expression back into its healthiest state. It's just about cutting sex off. I hear, sometimes CSATs get criticized for like, oh, you're just demonizing sexuality. And it's
right.
like, no, we're bringing sexuality away from shame. We're bringing it into
Mm-hmm.
integration with honesty and authenticity that sex isn't meant to hurt other people. It's
Right.
meant to be the best expression of ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so, anyways, I love this work because I do feel like you know, we're helping this to have a place in
Yeah.
society or education, knowledge, and awareness around
Yeah.
the topic as a whole.
Totally agree. Well, Erin, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and yourself with me and the listeners. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jackie. It was so nice to get to know you better.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to have the experience of being here today.
Yeah. All right. Have a good day.
Jack, you too.
We'll see ya. Bye-bye. Hey, listeners, as you can tell, I have lost my voice. I think it's just laryngitis. Hopefully, it's coming back soon. I know the only thing with laryngitis that helps is rest, which is hard when I have the job that I have. But I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. I have some other guests coming on board that I'm really excited to talk to and to share those episodes with you. And I want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to the channels that we have out there, please go ahead, like, subscribe, share if there's a podcast that you find especially meaningful and want to share with somebody in your life. And if you have subscribed on the podcast platforms, thank you so much. Please, if I can ask you to do one thing, head over to our YouTube platform, hit subscribe there. That's where you'll see all of the podcast episodes released with the video format as well as audio and some other bonus things that are going on. It costs you nothing to subscribe and it helps me with the algorithm. So please head over, hit subscribe on YouTube. The channel is Healing Paths Inc. I think it's Healing Paths Inc. And at the end of this episode, I want to remind you that your story matters. Remember, there's something meaningful in every chapter. Don't wait to share your story. until it's finished. Until next time, Jackie.